Good evening, everyone. Father Jim, Reverend Myra, Reverend Seeley, thank you. Gather the people, break the bread, tell the story. If you recall anything about what I say tonight, about planting seeds of hope in these current times, remember this wisdom that was shared with me by a neighbor who is a friend and lives across the street from me, who just recently moved to the city. Gather the people, break the bread, tell the story. 3 sentences, each with 3 words. For 2,000 years, it is how Christianity has spread hope. It is a time-tested method for bringing hope to those Jesus asked us to embrace, those suffering from poverty, intolerance, and violence. Gather the people, break the bread, tell the story. My name is Daniel Delehanty, and I'm married to Laura Delehanty. And for 25 years, we've lived in Rochester, and we've taught in the city school district, and we've raised our kids and sent them to city schools. And we've been members of Spiritus Christi, living just a stone's throw from here, actually, in the Cornhill neighborhood. To be honest, my wife should probably be speaking to you all. In our careers as teachers, she has led a special program for future teachers and leaders in the community. It's called the Teaching and Learning Institute. And in doing so, she has hosted countless dinners and barbecues and cookie baking sessions and professional development seminars and collaborations between East High and college students, and also between city students and suburban students. And I've been her understudy. It is something extraordinary to stand beside someone who is so exceptional at the process. Gather the people, break the bread, tell the story. A few weeks back, I was talking with Father Jim, and it had been a tough patch. I told him I was struggling. He asked me, why did you become a teacher, Dan? And I laughed, because the reason was, 25 years ago, I wanted to end poverty, racism, and violence. Pretty easy. And of course, naive. How's it going, he asked. Terrible, I said. Do you think it's still possible? Yeah, I do. I say that fully aware of the realities. But yes, I do. And what's more, after talking to Father Jim, it made me feel even better about being a teacher. So, how are we going to accomplish these lofty, and some would say impossible, goals? The answer: planting seeds of hope. Planting requires work and nurturing and being uncomfortable sometimes in the hot sun. And those seeds, when harvested at a later date, are not necessarily for you. If we wish to follow the path of Christ, then we must ask, to whom are these seeds of hope intended? And just as importantly, what exactly are we hoping for? We may rightly be praying for an uplifting, buoyant hope to raise our spirits. But after the last 2 years, I think we need to do work with intentionality and transparency about what kind of seed we're putting into the ground. I believe we can end poverty. I know it sounds crazy, but we must plant those seeds of hope. It's an honor for me to speak here tonight, and I'm going to share some ideas of planting seeds of hope based on my own personal faith. Please understand the context in which I speak. I'm 52 years old, and the older I get, the more I learn. And the more I realize I don't know. This is one reason why I like teaching at East High so much. My students teach me so much every year. For 25 years, I've taught U.S. history and civics and an education seminar for future teachers. But I've probably learned more than I've taught, to be honest. I enjoy getting to know my students and their families, and I want to share an interesting fact with you. I do an anonymous survey each year with my students, and we learn how to use demographics to make decisions about government. We study race, gender, sexual orientation, geography, and class as distinctions which influence public policy. I ask students what economic class their family is. It's an anonymous survey. Every response has been the same. This answer has been as dependable as heat in summer and snow in winter. For 2 decades, every one of my students is middle class. How can this be? According to the federal data, which measures free and reduced price lunches at a school, East High School has over 85% of students receiving free lunch. And there's probably more that qualify. Some families don't necessarily fill out the paperwork. That is a large group of students that are living and struggling with the obstacles of poverty. Excellent students, and I love teaching them. But they are struggling. So how could this be? They are all middle class, they tell me. And the answer is simple. They've told me they know somebody that is worse off than them. Therefore, they're middle class. And so what I've come to realize over time is one way that we keep poor people poor is we tell them they're not poor and that this is just how things are. But I believe that we can end poverty. My wife and I have given presentations to future teachers at local colleges and at a university. We usually start with this question: where are the smart kids born in Monroe County? Oh, and they have answers. Pittsford, Brighton, Fairport, Penfield, Webster, West Arundecoit. Our future teachers are excellent statisticians. They know the test scores. Then we ask them, okay, where are the good kids born in Monroe County? And that's when they realize it. And they start looking at one another. And then one of them raises their hand and asks, can they change their answer to the first question? Because the answer to both questions is the same. Everywhere. The smart kids, the good kids, are born everywhere. So how do we explain their original response? This idea that there is one town where the smart kids are born. Somewhere they are learning a lie, that some kids are better and more deserving than others. If you grew up on a street, as I did, where every family was middle class or upper middle class, we must acknowledge and tell the story. This was not a happy coincidence or an accident of circumstance. The suburbs of our community were designed to keep those living in poverty out and away from those who have money and own homes. And while our suburbs are plentiful with Christian churches, they are almost totally devoid of affordable housing. I wish I had the money to buy up a sizable amount of land in a suburban town. I'd love to buy some land in Pittsford. And then I'd like to propose 400 affordable apartments to be built, and then maybe 200 very nice homes, but modest, $50,000 to $75,000, and plant them in between the McMansions and invite the people of the East High community and the city of Rochester to join the good people of Pittsford. Make no mistake, the government would stop me. The Housing Rights Act of 1968 may have outlawed redlining, making it illegal, but tried to get my proposal past the local zoning board members and their comprehensive plan or master plan, not to mention the Zoning Board of Appeals, Conservation Board, Architectural Review Board, and the Historical Preservation Commission. They would stop me. Why? We've got to tell the story. The racism is institutionalized. By the way, if you do have the money to buy that property, I would love to talk to you after Mass. We got a great project that we could accomplish. To discuss the reasons for concentrated poverty may be contentious, but we need to sit down, the rich with the poor, people who want to change, and have this talk. Why? Because in every community, you will find good people. You will find a young boy whose glasses are broken and needs a new pair of glasses, and his friend has a father who is an eye doctor and will help him out and get him an extra pair of glasses. In every community, you will encounter a family will receive a cancer diagnosis, one of its members, and a meal train will be organized, and lawns will be mowed, and leaves will be raked, and people will take care of one another. In every community, there will be a kid that maybe needs a ride to baseball practice or to theater rehearsal or to just tutoring after school. And a ride can be arranged because it's a kind thing. It's the work of Christ. But if a person lives on a street and in a community where he or she never encounters someone who struggles with the obstacles of poverty, one, how is that person going to do the work of Christ on a daily basis? And two, what is that Christian doing living in that community in the first place? Am I in trouble yet? I am just a teacher of urban youth, and so my proclamations should be taken at the value for which you would assign a teacher from the city. I'm just one voice. But I could tell you this, my students do not want pity. Certainly, they do not want handouts. What they do want is opportunities. When society, and when I say society, I mean government and the landlords, conspire to profit off of those living in poverty and keep it concentrated in specific neighborhoods, the opportunities dry up. But if we were to practice the methodology of our Christianity and sow the right seeds, I believe, even after these last 2 years, we can see a way to ending poverty. I know it's crazy, but I think we can end racism. And so, we must plant those seeds of hope. I have 125 students, and 115 of them are African American, and 3 are white, and the rest are recent immigrants to the country. I have entire classes where every student is a Black American. And I can walk out the door of my school, drive less than 15 minutes, and I can find myself in a suburban classroom where every student will be white. Our schools are segregated. And while busing did not work in this town and others around the country, thanks in part to a Supreme Court case called Bradley versus Milligan, 1974. If you'd like to read the decision. It forbidded busing. When busing was happening before the case, integration did result. And there was more equitable educational results between blacks and whites. In fact, in this community, there is no protest from families with our famed urban-suburban program, which was featured once on the PBS NewsHour. Did you know that? A pioneering program intended to integrate suburban schools and also to bring students from the suburbs to the city. It has not quite worked out that way. It's more of a one-way street now than a two-way avenue. Urban teachers don't like the urban-suburban program because it takes many talented, gifted, wonderful young students from our schools, and we're very jealous of our students. But I can understand that there may be families that pursue this opportunity. But did you know, and you can look this up, if you are interested in doing the urban-suburban program, students are selected to participate in the program following a district-level review of student report cards, test scores, attendance records, teacher comments, and an interview. Who else needs an interview to attend a public school? Even in our attempts to integrate, racism is institutionalized. One of my many faults is I'm a true believer. And when I saw the recording of Dr. King giving the I Have a Dream speech on the Mall in 1963, the spiritual logic was so clear to me that I believed, and I do believe, and it led me to become a teacher, eventually here in the city of Rochester. However, when I posed the possibility of an integrated educational system in Monroe County, where students in my classes could choose to go to any suburban schools, I have come to expect now a response which I dread, but I think I may respect. And they say to me, Mister, I don't want to go to school out there. That has forced me to think differently. Was I expecting all the students to rejoice at the prospect of becoming a minority in a school of white students? It was ignorant of me. I still believe in integration and the dream of Dr. King, but my students have taught me to ask different questions. Why in the world don't more white families in the suburbs want to send their families to East High School? My school is the best school in Monroe County. I'm a great teacher. My wife is a better teacher. And my students are brilliant, caring, funny, and culturally diverse. I've realized that one narrative often presented in U.S. history is the progress of the African American community in dealing with racism. My students have asked me to give pause. Why do Black Americans have to make progress with racism? It's white people that need to make progress with racism. And that's why I believe that we should educate our children together. Oh, the criticism over the critical race theory, or as my wife and I like to call it, the truth. Why is it a crime to teach about the crime of redlining? What is the problem with reading from Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which teaches us about slavery in the modern form? Or Ibram X. Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, which teaches us the origin of racism? Or reading Nicole Hannah-Jones' work, The 1619 Project, which teaches us that the African American community throughout our country's history has actually been responsible for perfecting democracy and working to extend equality towards all. I don't think that the presidents of the 1800s were sitting back and thinking, gee, how could we extend more freedoms to women and African Americans? Nicole Hannah-Jones argues, listen, it was African Americans that led the way. What's the crime in teaching that? There are some states, I believe, that are making it a crime. That's because racism is institutionalized. Can we have that conversation? And can we tear down the racism that we find inherent in our government institutions? If we practice the methodology of Christianity and sow the right seeds, I believe that even after the last 2 years, we can see a way to ending racism. And I know I'm crazy, but I believe we can end violence, and we can plant those seeds of hope. I have no idea what to do here. This is a tough one. And maybe that's what the methodology is for. I have no answers, but I would like to share 2 stories that lead me to one controversial idea. First, my wife and I have led students to local suburban schools for student exchanges, and we visit the suburban school, they visit our school, and after visiting both schools, we break bread in the form of pizza, and then we share our stories about our similarities and our differences, and we hope to build some bridges. But there was one time that we were going to the suburban school, and the bus was ready to depart, and one of our juniors came to us in tears. And my wife pulled her aside, away from the other students, and spoke to her quietly, calmed her down, and spoke to her. She was terrified of going to the suburbs, because that's where all the guns were. She was afraid she was going to get shot. This was a young black woman afraid of going to a white school because of the threat of violence. When traveling through the suburbs, she saw houses as places where guns were stored and where racist people lived. It changed my perspective. And each year I discovered this to be a general consensus in my classes, that the suburbs are a dangerous place for people of color because everyone out there owns a gun. Technically, not accurate, but not exactly wrong either. There's 330 million people in the United States. There's 393 million guns. That's 120.5 guns for every 100 people. By way of comparison, the next closest country is Saudi Arabia with 42 guns per 100 people, and then Serbia with 39 guns per 100 people. And I checked, Father Jim, Ireland, 7 per 100. I still think it's too many. It's too high. A second story. There was a 24-hour period this summer when 3 people were murdered in our community. One was 2 blocks south of our house. Another was 3 blocks to the west of our house. And the third was a mother 1 block north of our house, sitting in her car with the children in the back seat. And that was a dark time for me. And a lot of us suffered and mourned for those families. And I did not have answers. The school year began, and we started monitoring the RPD portal. The Rochester Police Department has a portal that you can check out. It will tell you the status of crimes, those that are larceny and then those that are homicides. And we tracked the police's attention to the crimes, where the crimes being solved, and then we watched the murder rate as it built throughout 2021. In 2018, horribly, 28 people were murdered in the city of Rochester. In 2021, it was 82. You know, oddly enough, I asked my students to theorize why this significant change. And there were many theories, and not one of them mentioned the pandemic, which may mean that we have to have a conversation about health and mental health and its effects on people as part of our discussions when it comes to violence. They attributed mostly to people settling up scores. I don't know. Maybe it was. When I raised the question in my classroom, should people give information anonymously to help catch those responsible for killing someone? It was like a bomb went off in my class. Various forms of, are you crazy, Mr. D? Are you going to get yourself killed? After talking it through further, it was clear that students are afraid, their families are afraid, and they don't want to talk to the police to help solve the crimes because they live in fear. And there are entire neighborhoods in fear of guns, of those who would use guns. I wonder sometimes if we should stop calling them guns and just call them machines that kill people. And I wonder if that would have an effect on the next generation. We have to ask ourselves if we are prepared to give up our machines that kill people. We worry and we fret and we rage and we condemn the criminals, the unstable, the brokenhearted, and wish they had no access to these machines which kill people. But how can we ask them to get rid of their guns when we collectively will not put down our own? We need a social movement. In Ireland, in the 1990s, the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, had become a strictly criminal organization, and it was murdering people at will, and it was out of control. And something interesting happened. The women had enough of it. It was the women that took the guns. They took them away from their boyfriends and their husbands and their sons and brothers. They didn't turn their family in, but they took the guns away. And the IRA is not a criminal organization of any effect in Ireland in 2022. It's done. It's an idea. I don't know. But we need to be talking about it. If we were to practice the methodology of our Christianity and sow the right seeds, I believe, even after these last 2 years, we can see a way to ending violence. Some will say it's impossible. And in response, I will say, gather the people, break the bread, tell the story. Thank you.